You may have noticed some Canadian gun owners are a little frustrated online lately. You might be asking, I don't understand what the big deal is. I don't need these guns. I don't see these guns. I don't like guns. Why does this even matter? So I'm going to try and relate what happened to, and what is happening to Canadian gun owners to something maybe that more people can understand. Effectively, the government's announcement was this. Effective immediately, we are banning all touch-style large cell phones. No one needs a cell phone like this. In fact, hundreds of Canadians die every year because of distracted driving. There are thousands of accidents every year because people aren't paying attention. There's suicides because people say things online and because people can read comments right away. And speaking of that, be nice in the comments below. Civil people, civil the whole way. Let's have a conversation here. So effective immediately, we are banning all touch-style large screen cell phones. Now, we're not going after the businessman who is trying to use a cell phone for legitimate purposes. We are not banning all telecommunication devices, just these style of phones that obviously allow for so much distracted driving, so much instant response to mean comments, and so much cyberbullying. And so effective immediately, Canada is closed to all touch-style cell phones. Now, we've talked with many Canadians throughout the country, and we know that your phones are important to you. So you're still welcome to get a flip style phone, a rotary phone, some other type of landline. We're not prohibiting those. You're still welcome to carry on, but there is no need for this type of phone that's only purpose is designed to distract you from what you're currently working on. And you might get that and you say, well, wait a second, I legally bought my phone, I use my phone appropriately, why all of a sudden am I losing the right to it? Right. Also, maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to try and comply. And so you take your cell phone that you can no longer use, you can no longer transport, you've purchased it, you've spent all this money on it, it is yours, you legally own it, but now you can't use it. So you take the battery out, as per the government recommendations, you put it in a locked, sealed box with 2 locks, then you put that into a locked cupboard and you lock it and you say, I will no longer use this touch-style phone that is only meant to distract me, which will kill people. And then you decide that I'm going to dig around and you root out your old Motorola Razr phone. You're like, okay, look it, I can't just be distracted. I have to flip it every single time I want to call. Obviously, this means I can't be distracted by it. Or you dig out your old Blackberry and you're like, okay, it's got a tiny screen. It's not a large style. It's got a small style and it's not touch because I have to touch buttons. And then what you find out is the next day, and you don't find out through an official government source, you find out through a social media outlet like a Facebook group or some Twitter, that in fact some government bureaucrats decided to overextend that initial rule, even though the government said they weren't going to come after your telecommunication devices, even though the government said that businessmen were still allowed to have cell phones as long as they, use the old style cell phones that your grandparents were used to, that would be fine. And then you find out that that Blackberry that your parents had, all of a sudden, actually somebody's decided that, you know what, its screen is still large enough and it still has buttons to touch, and so it is a distraction tool, and so therefore it should be removed. And you're like, well, but that wasn't in the rule. I don't understand. And I didn't even hear from a government source. I found out online, and then when I dig in, I find out that in fact they have prohibited that cell phone. So then I get out my old Motorola Razr, and then I find out, I'm like, well, an old Motorola Razr, I mean, it's a complete flip phone. There's not even like a screen on it. But then you find out that in fact it's been prohibited, and you're like, well, how is that possible? And it just so happens that it's a variant. And what the government means by that is that a long time ago, Motorola Razrs worked with iPods, and they had a Razr iPod kind of thing, a Razr iPod phone thing happening. And then Apple went on to obviously make the iPhone. And so since, therefore, Apple makes an iPhone, and they also at one point in time made a Razr, therefore your Motorola Razr flip phone. And then you might say, this is getting a little ridiculous. And then you say, okay, well, what about my kid's VTech phone? You know, that kid play phone? And then you find out, in fact, the government decided to ban it. And then you're thinking, the government's crazy. They're banning all these phones, things that aren't even really phones, and then they're claiming that these phones are only a distraction, but my kid's phone isn't there to distract. It's a plaything for them to do stuff on. And then you get thinking, wait a second. The government that just enacted this law that makes zero sense for anybody that owns a cell phone and uses it on a regular basis and knows how to use it appropriately, you realize that that government only has like a quarter of the vote that got them in. And Parliament's not even sitting. And this law didn't come through any type of judiciary measure where you had experts come in and weigh what cell phones are and what cell phones aren't. They just said, this is the law, no review. Now you are automatically a criminal because you happen to own these phones. That's why gun owners are frustrated.